So, good evening everyone. How are you? Hi. You're all fine? So, how have you been feeling with the UPSC prep? Every one of you is an aspirant. क्या feelings हैं अभी? Anyone feeling happy with what they're doing? Be excited. You are here to follow your dreams. All of you want to be an officer, right? Have higher energy. So, let me start with introduction. I am Shree. I have secured AIR 71 in UPSC CSE 2021, and this was my second attempt. In my first attempt, I did not get through prelims, missed the cutoff by 5 marks. And let me start with my academic background. So I have been a KV, Kendriya Vidyalaya Sangathan student until 12th standard. My graduation and masters, I have completed an integrated degree in economics from IIT Kanpur. And right after I graduated, I finished my masters in 2020, and I have been preparing since 2020. So my first attempt was in CSE 2020, where I did not get through, and this is 2021, where it was lucky, and I did get through, and I get a chance to talk to you. So let's start. Do you have any questions in the beginning, or shall we start with prelims? Shall we start with prelims? So, how many of you are afraid of Csat? Show of hands. There's a lot of fear. Okay, so I'll give you my credentials in Csat. In both my attempts, I have secured 150 plus marks in Csat. In my first attempt, I secured 151, and this year 153. So Csat has been one of my strong areas. I feel confident to guide you in Csat. When it comes to Csat, what matters the most is practice. You have to have your fundamentals right. Each one of us has had mathematics until class 10th, and trust me, for qualifying Csat, that is enough. Even if you have had a humanities background in 11th and 12th or your graduation, it does not matter. What matters is that you have your fundamentals until class 10th very strong, so that you can understand the questions and do not do any silly mistakes or calculation mistakes. So that is something very important. Csat, as you know, has 3 parts. So I'll just use the pen. So we have quantitative questions. Then we have some reasoning question. Yeah. And there are some comprehension questions. So first, dealing with the quantitative aspects. In quantitative, as I said before, your 10th standard mathematics foundation is enough. There will always be questions that are beyond that syllabus, but Csat is a qualifying paper, so you do not have to solve all the questions. Just ensure that your accuracy is on point. How many ever questions you're solving, you have to just clear the cutoff. That is 70 marks. 67, but have 70 in your mind. So that, because having a little buffer is necessary. So that is something that you do for quantitative. For those who have not practiced maths in years, the first step would be to go through the PYQs of Csat. Check what score you are getting. Before, I think people often recommend starting with GS preparation, but I would recommend starting with Csat preparation, because as the exam draws closer, you do not have time for Csat. GS is difficult, GS is time taking, and by the end of the exam, when prelims is very close, we don't usually prepare for. So all of you are preparing for the 2023 attempt, or anyone for 24? 23, so, and 2 for 24, I think. So you all have a lot of time. right now you can start with Csat preparation. I'd recommend starting with quantitative and reasoning questions for those who do not have a background in maths or those who have lost practice. Start with the PYQs. Identify your weak areas. So one thing, in every section, I'll be reiterating this, focus must be on your weak areas. Always. So identify where your weaknesses lie. And once you have identified those areas, do targeted practice regarding those areas. It is possible ki you're doing in the first time you're solving the questions and each of the questions is wrong. So you might think all of these are weak areas. So there is this analysis process. Why are you making mistake in a particular question? Whether you don't know the concept, or you have done a calculation mistake, or you were just nervous and you solved the right question, but solved up to the right option, but you marked something else. So that is something that happens with each one of us. You must not lose confidence at that stage. So for quantitative, your start practicing even in reasoning. So when it comes to reasoning, I'd recommend, most of us have not done any reasoning until school or even in college. So for reasoning, I'd recommend, there are certain types of questions like sitting arrangement questions or logical questions. There are puzzles. So watch videos of all those questions, how to approach those questions. For example, when a seating arrangement question is done, the first step, if they are writing that they are sitting in a circle, the first step is to draw a circle and mark the number of seats. So these are some fundamental ways of approaching the question that we cannot learn on our own. If we spend time on that, it's a lot of waste, because all of us have limited time. So we cannot learn that on our own. For that, we must watch the videos that are there and use those videos to understand where to start approaching the question. And when you have any problems, most of you, since you are here, you have your peer groups. Those who are not here, they can also look for peer groups online or offline in their area. So what is necessary is to discuss the questions. And there are also several online initiatives where they discuss questions, especially PYQs questions, step by step. So when you're making mistakes, look at the videos of the type of questions that you're making a mistake in, and then look at the steps that they are following, compare it with your process. Sometimes it is possible that you are using a right process. I'm saying a right process because there are multiple ways of solving a question. Some are faster, others slower. So what you must do is to look at what are the faster processes and something to increase the speed. When it comes to maths and reasoning based questions, memorizing the multiplication tables, memorizing squares, cubes, so on helps, both in identifying patterns as well as solving. So if you have time, there are methods like the single line multiplication method. They help. Practice a lot of multiplication, basic multiplication division, so that you don't make mistake in the exam hall. And one tip, use a pencil. When it comes to prelims, always use a pencil in the exam hall. So why pencil? Now I'll compare my first attempt versus my second attempt. In my first attempt, I was using a pen to solve the questions, and as all of us do, I made a few mistakes. I wanted to change the answer. I tried solving again, but then the options were marked, some were marked right, some were marked wrong, and I got confused and marked the wrong answer in my OMR sheet. So to avoid such a mistake, like after solving for the right answer, solving twice and thrice, and yet we are marking the wrong answer. So that is something we all want to avoid. So in this case, using a pencil helps, so that when you're using a pencil, you can just have an eraser, strike out all, erase off all of the first attempt things, and then you can start afresh. So using a pencil is important, and in prelims, both GS and Csat paper. And next we come to the comprehension section. The one thing that we have to keep in mind is that focus on what is already given in the question. In the comprehension passages, the most common mistake is to use our brain. We should not do that. How many of us are guilty of that? I'll raise my hand. No one else? Never attempted any PYQs? That's where your mistake lies. Start solving with the PYQs. So when it comes to comprehension questions, do not use your brain. Use the information that is given within the question. So for this, when we are starting, we need to start with a pen or a pencil in hand. Even while reading the question, there are two approaches. Some people read the question first and then go to the passage, and some others read the passage first and then go to the question. So I was in the latter category. I always read the question first. After solving a lot of questions, especially comprehension based question, I've arrived at I have an idea of what will be important in this particular question. So while reading the paragraph itself, I underline some of the keywords that are arising in the paragraph, and when we go to the question, 9 out of 10 times the parts that I have underlined are the ones from which the question is asked. So when I have to solve the question, I can easily just look at my underlines, and it significantly increases my speed. So you can try both methods. UPSC is something where there is no one fixed way of doing things. So you can try both methods and see what fits you and practice accordingly. And practice is always the mantra. So any doubts until this? Any specific doubts in Csat? Please ask. Yes?
What books should we refer for Seaside?
What?
What books? Any other books that we should refer for Seaside?
Sources for Seaside. So I did not specifically refer to any specific sources during my UPSC preparation. Before UPSC, I referred to R.S. Agrawal's book in reasoning and B.S. Sijwali's book in reasoning. So those I referred during my school time. So if you have time, B.S. Sijwali and R.S. Agrawal, both books are very bulky. So if you are going to refer to those books, should I mention the name here or? So. Sijwali and R.S. Agrawal. So if you are going to refer to any of these books, my basic idea would be to go to the specific chapters that are your weak areas and solve accordingly. And since we are all in a lack of time, go to the harder exercises first, like those questions given at the end of any given exercise. They are the more difficult ones. So start approaching with that. If you are able to solve them, then you can just skip to the next chapter. So some smart ways to optimize your time usage would help. So these are the books that I used during my school time. I am not sure how effective they'll be for UPSC CSAT preparation, but they helped me at that time. So you can try these. And any other questions?
Do you study for CSAT daily or can you study along with GS?
In my case, CSAT has been my strong area. So I only practiced mock tests periodically. So once a month for me, but for those who have difficulty in CSAT, in the beginning, I'd recommend that you give around 3 to 4 hours per week initially. And when you have some strength, like the target must be that whenever you're solving a mock, out of 200, you must be scoring around 100. If you score around 100 in a mock, then even under the pressure conditions of UPSC prelims, you will be able to clear the cutoff. So try targeting 100, and once you start getting 100 marks in each of the mocks that you're attempting, then you can decrease the number of hours you're giving to CSAT. It can be reduced to just 2 hours per week where you solve a mock test. And again, try to solve the mock test within 90 minutes. Because you have 120 minutes in the exam hall, always assume that 5 to 10 minutes will go in bubbling, or there'll be some disturbance in the classroom, the invigilator would start giving instructions, things happen. So 5 to 10 minutes for that, and again 15 minutes will go for your OMR sheet, marking the OMR sheet, bubbling and all. So always try to practice for 90 minutes. 90 minutes, you'll have to solve the CSAT questions, and then the rest of 30 minutes, analyze your mistakes. If it takes longer, it's fine, because analyzing the mistakes is most important. So you can eventually reduce the time, but initially focus more on CSAT. So because initially we do have time for that. Any other questions? Yes?
Ma'am, what is the ideal time limit which we have to complete the comprehension?
It is a very subjective question. So my strength area has been quantitative and reasoning. So I usually start the paper with solving the quantitative and reasoning questions first, marking the OMR sheet for that, and whatever time remains, I attempt the comprehension questions in that. I have some other friends who start with comprehension questions because it's their stronger area. So it completely depends on you. So the time that you give for comprehension must be dependent on how accurate your comprehension passages are. If you have noticed that if you attempt 10 questions of comprehension and you're getting 9 right, whereas in reasoning and quantitative questions out of 10 you're only getting 5 right, so it makes sense for you to spend more time on comprehension. And vice versa, if you're getting more questions correct in quantitative and reasoning, you can spend more time on that. So it will depend completely on what your accuracy is in the various streams, but ensure that you're scoring around 100 in all of your mocks. Anything else? Okay, so shall we move on to the GS part of prelims, which has been scaring everyone? So let's move to the GS prelims. It is scary, I agree. And 2022's paper has been scarier than 21 and 20. So what can we still do? Because the paper is getting unpredictable every year, and we still have to get through prelims. Otherwise, entire mains preparation will just go to waste. So what we did in our years was attempting a lot of mocks. When we are every time, even when I was an aspirant, my question was how many mocks to attempt. But the right question is not how many mocks to attempt. The right question is how to make the most out of the mocks that we are attempting. So the number of mocks, of course, it cannot be very few, like only 5 or 10 mocks. That's not enough. Try to target something around 30, 40 mocks, if possible more. But around 30, 40 mocks is I think the optima. Like that's the basic minimum that one has to do, unless you are some superstar and can just rock the paper, which most of us are not. So in that case, 30 to 40 mocks, and how to benefit from the mocks that you are attempting. So we have to, again, the mantra of analysis of your tests comes in. So in this case, what I did was I always solved the questions in a digital mode. My note taking has always been digital. So what I used to do was I had the question papers in PDF format on my laptop. I would solve those questions, and whatever questions I made a mistake in, I would analyze these questions in 3 parts. Why am I making a mistake? Do I not know? I'll just note them down. So 3 categories of mistakes according to me. First is basic lack of conceptual understanding. So if you don't understand a topic and try to attempt the question, it will most likely be wrong. In that case, go back to the fundamental books that you're reading. For polity, it's obviously Lakshmikant. For history, your specific sources that you're referring to. I'll talk about sources just next to this. But this conceptual understanding, if you're lacking conceptual understanding, then please go back to the sources that you have read. And the second type of mistake is silly mistakes. A silly mistake is never a silly mistake. One of my teachers, when I was in school, used to say, no mistake is silly. So assume that I have an apple on your head and I have to shoot through the apple. If I miss even by 1 degree, I'll injure you. So it's not a silly mistake. It's just a mistake of 1 degree, but it's not silly. So no mistake is silly. And this similar level of fatality occurs if we are doing silly mistakes in our prelims. We won't get through by just 1 mark or a decimal of a mark. So understand the seriousness of your mistake. And if you're marking it wrong, then start being more aware. Try to work on your calmness and anxiety levels, because most of the time our silly mistakes are made because we are nervous in the exam hall. While in the exam hall, think only about the exam. It's not a question of life and death, it's only an exam. While you're in the exam hall, do not think about what will happen after the result. I know it's very easy to say. Everyone is thinking in their mind, ये तो बोलने का काम है, बोल रही हैं. But it's very easy to say, but it is something that we have to do. While in the exam hall, if you're starting to think about what will happen after this, I did not revise, I did not sleep properly, I'm hungry, millions of thoughts, but just calm down and focus on the question. So, and while focusing on the question and also marking in the OMR sheet, just confirm twice that what you have marked here is what you're marking there. Use a pencil. Even if you have marked a wrong dot, then you can just erase it out and change it. So be very careful. Do not make silly mistakes, because these hurt the most. When you're doing your post-exam analysis after you do not get through pre, these are the ones that hurt the most. Not this one, not this one. And the third is application-based mistakes. So in recent years, the trend has been application-based question. Like, there won't be a direct question. They'll ask something, you have to think of two different concepts and then mix them up and solve the right answer. So in these type of questions, the analysis given at whichever institutes mock tests you have subscribed to, all institutes provide analysis at the end. Like, they provide detailed concepts, what concepts that they have been using here and how did they link up those things. So they provide the analysis in a very detailed format at the end of the question paper. Spend time on that portion. My idea was to spend around 1 hour for 100 questions while solving. And then for analysis, I used to have 2.5 to 3 hours. Initially, this analysis part took 4 hours. But I tried reducing it to 2 hours, and when you're making fewer mistakes, it can also get reduced to 1.5 hours. But this time, don't think of it as a wastage of time. These 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever time, even if it's 5 or 6 hours, it's fine. Because these are what are going to get you marks in prelims. So while doing the analysis, read the detailed explanation, underline or highlight the parts that are new to you, or the parts which you forget several times often. So highlight those parts and highlight the linkages of concepts that are appearing. If there are some concepts that you don't remember with clarity, go back to the books right at that moment. Don't put until tomorrow, because tomorrow never comes from practical experience. Tomorrow never comes, and so just go back to the books right there and then. Do not get distracted in the maze of any other thing. Like, when you're just have a clarity of focus in your mind that I have to revise this chapter and I'll come back to this analysis again today itself. That is important, because sometimes we just go to read the chapter, we spend too much time reading the chapter, and then we do not come back to the analysis. And next day, I'll do it tomorrow, and the analysis remains incomplete. So that is something that we must avoid. So once we are done with this application-based mistakes also, we have corrected them. Make notes out of it. Digital, I found it very convenient, because I used to just take screenshots of the portion where I have highlighted it and compiled it in my OneNote. So those screenshot thing helps. Some people prefer writing, but for me, writing was slower. You can find your own way, but what is most important is to have this compilation of your frequently mistaken areas. Make notes out of this and revise them several times. In the last few days, like 3 weeks, around 20 days before the prelims, I only referred to 2 things. Number 1 was PYQs. I was trying to solve them again and again, look at the solutions, look at the concepts that are being asked repeatedly. And second is my notes from all the mocks that I had taken. So these 2 things are what I referred to just before the prelims. And any other things, like you can have a list of areas that you keep forgetting often. So these areas are what you must focus in the last few days. Now coming to sources. So this is how you have to attempt the question, like approach preparation of prelims. When it comes to sources, only one mantra. Stick to 1, at most 2 sources for any given chapter. Whatever source feels better for you and has good coverage, just stick to it. We have this, since you are all living here, and even in the online currently, everyone is like, this year questions were asked from this book, so let's prepare from this book. And when the number of attempts increases, that anxiety increases. यहाँ से आ रहा है तो मिस नहीं करना है, तो don't run after that. Whatever source you are using, just stick to 1 or 2 basic sources and revise them as many times as you can. As we all know, direct questions are not asked any longer. So for example, in 2020, the Rukmabai case was asked. It was not mentioned in any of the standard sources. So what will you do? You can't go running after sources. We have to skip a few questions. We have to make intelligent questions and more than a few questions, intelligent guessing, but we cannot run after sources. So just stick to few basic sources, and that will depend on whatever you prefer. I'll list out my sources. For polity, I used Lakshmikant. For geography, I stuck to NCRT, 11th and 12th standard NCRT. For history, modern history, I studied from Spectrum itself. And for the ancient history, the Tamil Nadu state books are very good. And ancient and medieval both. And for the art and culture, selective reading of Nitin Singhania. The chapters that are asked often, I refer to that. And when it comes to environment, basic understanding I got from the Shankar book on environment. You can refer to any source you want because it's just for basic understanding. My experience has been that most of the environment questions come from current affairs, for which any compilation is good. And am I missing something else? IR is not asked in prelims. Economics, yeah. When it comes to economics, I have economics optional, so I did not prepare economics too much. I especially focused on the current affairs parts of economics. So when it comes to current affairs, we have a doubt, newspaper. How much time to spend on newspaper? How to make the most use of a newspaper? My experience is that when we are in the initial stages of preparing, we do not understand what to focus on in a newspaper, how much time to spend. So, and often we miss out on the important parts in the newspaper. So my experience has generally been to refer to the compilations of, there are, for example, Vision has this daily compilation of news. If you can follow that, just spend 15 to 20 minutes on that. It's 2 pages long, very easy to cover. Just go through it. Do not make notes of current affairs. Unless you have like 36 hours in a day, don't. Because making notes of current affairs, it takes a lot of time, and then it is very bulky because everything seems important, and then we don't have time to revise. And so do not make notes of current affairs. Either you can revise using the monthly compilations, but for people like me who are unable to like spend every month some time for the monthly compilation, I preferred the PT365. There are several versions of PT365 by other institutes, but I found the Vision PT365 most effective for prelims. And selectively revise all of the PT365 at least twice, but some sections like art and culture, environment, science and technology, these are the ones from which most of the questions are asked from the current affairs compilations itself. So just try to revise these current affairs compilations again and again. And whenever you have any difficulties in the concepts, just Google them. If you have teachers that can explain to you, very good. But if we keep the doubts for teachers, we generally forget it, or we don't have time to ask it sometimes. So just Google it, watch a video or two, or just read an article. It generally helps. And so this is what I did for pre and mains, both. I used current affairs compilations. For mains, the mains 365 series is very effective. When we come to mains preparation, I'll let you know how to use it best. For PT 365, just read it, underline the important portions, and revise again and again. Any other questions? Yes?
Which subject did you dislike the most, and how did you prepare it?
Dislike the most? It was not dislike, but I am still very afraid of polity. And how I prepared it, I had to revise it a lot more than the other subjects. having a fear of the subject is generally not useful for the exam. You have a negative bias towards the subject and make more mistakes. So whenever I had to approach polity, I just calm myself down with whatever I like most. I like listening to music, so I just listen to a few songs and keep it aside, and then open polity with a fresh mind. And I'll think I'm not afraid of this subject. I like this subject. This positive reinforcement in your mind. Just I like this subject. I'll do my best. उसके बाद देखा जाएगा. So having a positive feeling would help if you're afraid of any subject. Who had another question? Yes.
Are the compilations enough for current affairs?
See, nothing is enough. When it comes to UPSC, you cannot predict all the questions, but you have to qualify the exam. In the recent years, the cutoff is going down. So whatever sources if you are referring to, you must revise it enough number of times so that you don't regret in the exam hall, I saw this, but now I can't attempt the question correctly. So just ensure that whatever sources you are referring to, that covers the entire thing, all the topics. So the basic plus point of those compilations is that they cover all the sub points as well in the exam. So if there are n number of topics in history, so they'll cover all the n number of topics from history that have relevance in current affairs. So that is the plus point of compilations. They cover everything. Then it becomes your responsibility that you read all the pages of the compilation and then revise the selectively important ones. And yes, there's one more important thing, maps. When it comes to prelims, in map-based questions, we tend to make a lot of mistakes. So to get an idea of maps, there are several channels on Telegram whose handles keep changing, so I can't mention them. But you can just search UPSC maps, geography maps, and those channels often put the UPSC specific targeted things regularly. They post things regularly, so just refer to whatever they have posted in a day. Every day revise through it, and at the end of the week or at the end of the month, go through it all. Because there is only one way of retaining maps, that is through retention. One is reading, going through the maps, and second is marking on a rough map yourself. So you can try drawing the maps and roughly mark on that, or just stare at the India map that you have fixed in your room and try to look at mention the locations in your own mind, use a sketch pen to mark it and then erase it. So the practice will depend on whatever is comfortable for you, but in mapping we have to do a lot of practice, and these Telegram channels have helped me. Any other questions? Yes?
Ma'am, when we read the newspaper in editorial part and science and technology part, we come to see some important points and data. Then what I should do? Either I should cut the paper or I should write on copy.
So when it comes to, have your seat. When it comes to data points, what we need to do is we are generally making notes for mains, and the data will generally be used for your mains answer writing. So wherever you have the topic in your notes, for example, I see a data point regarding nanomaterials. So wherever you have made nanomaterials based notes, just add the data point there. So this will be more effective, because if the things are scattered, you won't have time to revise in the end. But if the things are in one place, you will be able to make the most out of your preparation. So I think newspaper clippings is not a very productive idea. Just try to mention it in your notes. There was another question.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, first of all, congratulations to you. Ma'am, my question is regarding that U of UPSC, which stands for unpredictability. Like in 2021 paper, we saw sports questions coming up. So can we do anything about it, or just we need to skip it? Like, I didn't get through that sports section in current affairs, so I skipped those questions in that paper.
When sports question was asked in our prelims, none of us had prepared sports. And I'm someone who does not follow sports at all. So, but I attempted all of the questions. So that is, we'll come to approach right after this. When the UPSC U stands for unpredictability, try not to think in this way. The U in UPSC stands for union. You want to serve the union. That's the end of the story. Okay? And like if you create a fear, as I told, a positive reaffirmation helps. If you create a fear of unpredictability in your mind, it will affect you negatively in the exam hall, and that is something we do not want. It is unpredictable for everyone. What is in our control? We can prepare the best for it and just focus on preparing. Like, if sports section is asked, if you feel like you can spend some time and get returns on the sports section, go ahead, prepare it. If you feel that reading a lot from the sports section will still not fetch you marks, you can ignore it while preparing. Skip those questions. We can like, the cutoff in recent years is going below 100. This year I think it will be around 90 or something, below 90. So you do not have to attempt all the questions. Just ensure that your accuracy is correct and you are attempting sufficient number of questions so that you clear the cutoff. Any other questions?
What is the best way to get the most out of the mock test? Like, should we solve it on the hard copy and then capture the screenshot that you do, or should we practice something online and then what is the best way to get out the most?
It's very subjective. Like, I did not solve in a hard copy. The screenshots that I took were from the detailed explanation section at the end of the questions. Like, after the question, after the answers, there's an explanation section. So those are the screenshots that I was taking. It will depend completely on you. Whatever is most comfortable for you, in that way make notes. The mantra is to make notes that you can revise at the end. If you can revise the entire mock test at the end, be my guest. You're free to do so, but the mantra is to analyze and revise before prelims. So that is something. Anything else? Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Can you please explain in detail as in how to use PYQs year along? I mean, like many toppers again and again refer to us, please refer PYQ for both prelims and mains. So please, can you explain in detail?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So, yes, PYQs for prelims. In my 2021 attempt, I referred to the 26-year compilation of PYQs. There are two major things that you can take out of PYQs. Number one is the recurrent themes. There are some topics on which they keep on asking questions, and some questions are even repeated after 10 or 15 years gap. So that is something that you can do. The recurrent themes. If you spot a topic that has been asked several times in the questions, or that has been mentioned in the options several times, both of these things are important while solving the PYQs, not just the questions, but also the options that are given. Take note of both of them, and whatever themes are repeated, go and revise them. Prepare well, prepare your notes well. For example, Buddhism and Jainism, these are, and Vijayanagara Kingdom, these are some of the very frequently asked questions. So for Buddhism, I have made detailed notes of around 15-16 pages, and there is no question that comes from outside that. So that is something that you can do. I studied from a source, and then based on the PYQs, whatever areas were remaining, I added them in my notes. I researched the options and then added them in my notes. So that is something you can do. One is the recurrent themes. Second, which worked until 2021 but did not work this year, was observing intelligent guessing among the options. So I'm not sure if I should advise you for that, but what we did was to notice the patterns of the options, and there are certain type of options that will always be wrong. For example, we had the extreme statements formula, but I saw in your paper that all of the questions had only statement. So this did not work this time, but intelligent guessing was something that we worked on. And approaching the paper. Some people have the doubt how many questions to attempt. So when it comes to me, I attempted all the questions in prelims, 100 in the GS paper, 80 in the CSAT paper. But these stunts are not advised to be performed in exam circumstances. So do as you are comfortable. So in case of GS paper, first of all, there are generally two approaches. One is the iteration-based approach. Some people recommend that firstly do the questions you are very confident in, then go to the questions you are less confident in, and third iterations. I generally was not able to manage time for 3 or 4 iterations in the exam hall. So my approach was, in the first attempt, I would just either the questions I am 100% confident that I'll be able to solve, or the questions where I am 100% confident that even if I give myself time to think, I won't get to the answer. So my target was to solve around 90 to 95 questions minimum in the exam hall out of 100. But so I ended up solving all of them. So if I'm sure that I won't be able to crack it even if I give myself time, so whatever seems the most likely, I just attempt it at the moment. So these two types of questions I would attempt, and for the second iteration, I'd leave the questions where I think that I might recollect this, like the areas where I did not revise properly. So in those areas, sometimes if we given enough time, we can remember whatever we have studied. So those kind of questions I left for the second iteration. So that is something that can help you in approaching this. Again, the use of pencil. So when you use a pencil, in the first and second iteration, just notice that I have still not marked the OMR sheet. While marking the OMR sheet, I would, when you are using a pencil, there's one mantra. Some of the people keep their question papers very clean. They do not do any markings, just tick or cross, and sometimes not even that. Do not try to keep your question paper clean. It's for your use. Make the best use of all the rough white spaces given in this. While solving, I would mention the logic that I'm using to solve the question. Like if I'm eliminating an option, I'd mention why I eliminated in rough words, in keywords. You have to understand. But what it helped me, that while marking, I'd look at the logic that I've used in the question, and then that will help me solve the question again fastly, in a quick way. And I'll see that the logic that I've used is still correct. I do not have any second thoughts on that. Then the option is again correct according to the logic I used. And then once I've looked at those two things, I'll mark it in the OMR sheet. Again with a pencil and then pen in the rough way. That's why I practiced within 1 hour, I'll solve all the 100 questions. So I have 1 hour to do all of this. Resolve the question, mark the OMR sheet. So this was my approach of solving the paper. You can, again, there are people who attempt only 60-65 questions and have a very high accuracy rate. If you are one of them, do not try to attempt all the 90 plus questions. But if you are someone who is not able to clear the cutoff with 60 or 65 questions, try to increase the number of questions that you are attempting. And even in the mock test, another benefit of mock test is to experiment number of methods of solving the paper. Some mocks try to attempt only 60 questions, in others 70, 80. See what works best for you and utilize it to your benefits. Any other questions?
Can you share a little bit about your DAF and your interview?
We'll come to interview after mains. So any other questions on prelims? Yes?
When to start the PYQ practice?
Okay, just PYQ practice must be done along with your prelims preparation. And then there is this doubt of when to start prelims preparation itself. So my approach was never to segregate prelims and mains preparation. The conceptual clarity that is used is the same in both of these papers. So just do both of them together, prelims and mains. And for specifically only prelims based practice, around 60 days before the exam, 60 days or 90 days, whatever seems comfortable for you. Just start with the prelims question. You will be attempting only mock test, re-attempting the mocks that you scored very less marks in, and then analyzing your mistakes. So around 60 days of focused prelims preparation, where you give very little time, around 20 to 25% of your day to mains or even lesser. So that is something that I used to do. And PYQ, the sooner you start, the better, because the more number of times you attempt the PYQs, the better. In last year, 2021 paper, a lot of economics questions were from the PYQs, directly from the PYQs, either the questions or the options. So when you solve the PYQs many number of times, you do not have to even think. So it saves a lot of time for you. So that is something you can do. Any other question?
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is with regard to PYQ only. While referring to PYQ, since I am a fresher, so while referring to PYQ, should we go for only a static part, or because we haven't kept track of the current affairs that are asked in that paper? So what we should do?
See, I used to look at all the questions initially. There are some questions that are pretty obvious that are not relevant now. For example, in geography, the population in a certain year. So they are not relevant now, and the pattern of UPSC is also changed. In the recent years, it's more of analytical and application-based question rather than memory-based questions. So you can accordingly see that these questions are not asked these days, so you can pay less attention to them. And another thing used to be that 2013-14 onwards, the pattern has stuck. So the current pattern has started around 2013-14 for both prelims and mains. So these last 7, 8 or 10-year questions, pay special attention to them. And 2016 onwards, until 16 to 21, the intelligent guessing techniques matched. So that is something that we paid attention on. You can try observing what techniques work on your paper, on 2022 paper, and accordingly use the PYQs. Any other?
Ma'am?
I just answered the question. For me, for prelims and mains, compilations seemed enough. For interview preparation, I referred to newspapers, and I'll come to that later.
Ma'am?
Daily you can read, but it's up to you. Do you have 36 hours in a day?
Ma'am, is it necessary to make the short note of NCERT book?
When it comes to short notes, there is one formula. If in a given subject you are referring to only one source, you do not have to make short notes of that, because that source itself is your short notes. If there are something that is not given in the in that particular source, you can make notes, use sticky notes, or just write in the book itself. And if there is a subject in which you have to refer to multiple sources, for example, topics in mains like IR or ethics or security, so in that we refer to multiple sources. For those, we need to make short notes. Again, for mains, there are a lot of areas where like polity is not just the polity that is asked in the exam, is not just what is given in Lakshmikant. So in that case, you can have like the compilation of data pointers separately, compilation of GS1, the case studies that you'll be using, the data points that you'll be using, you can have separate notes for them. So be smart in making notes. And there is no certain set formula. If there is a subject which you are very comfortable in, you do not have to make notes for that. But if there is something that requires revision on your part, do go ahead and make notes, even if I say don't make notes for Lakshmikant. But if you want to make notes, and if you need that, you need notes from Lakshmikant, then go ahead and make it. It's you have to qualify the exam at the end of the day, so do what suits you. Anything else? Okay, so let's move on to mains preparation. So starting with essay. How many of you have written at least one essay so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, at least one essay. So we see this is a very underprepared part, and it is a general experience among candidates. We think that हमने तो board में essay लिखा है, we'll just go in the exam hall and write, or we'll practice in the last month and we'll write. Make sure that between prelims and mains, we generally do not have time for essay preparation, especially if our syllabus is incomplete in any of the GS papers. And essay is a subject where the returns on your investment is very high. You can easily increase your marks in essay preparation. So that is something which must not remain ignored. For essay preparation, how to start with essay preparation. So my first step was, most of us have not written an essay since our 12th board exams. And how I started, and the essays that we used to write in school and the ones we need to write here will be very different. In 2021, we had the shocker that all of the questions were from philosophical type of essays, and it's generally a weak area for most of us. So what I started was to read the essays of previous year toppers, specifically those people who have scored well in the essay paper. What I did was to go through I collected some of their essays, went through those essays and made notes out of what I like in the essays, what I think could have been done better. It's your personal notes. You can be as critical of them as possible. They are much wiser than us, but you don't have to think of that. They've done it before us, but we can still do better. And if we do not understand the mistakes that they have been doing, we are condemned to repeat it. So just try to analyze what they have done in the essay. Start with reading 3, 4, or at least 5 essays of previous year toppers. Then the second step is to, when you have a topper's essay on a given topic, look at the topic, don't look at their essay, and write what you feel you will write in the essay exam. It can be just 3-4 pages in the beginning. It can be 1,000 words. It can be 1,500 words. Whatever you're comfortable, just write. And then compare your essay with what the toppers have written. It is possible that you might be verbose in the beginning. A small idea, you are taking an entire paragraph to cover it, or you are very you do not have enough dimensions to write on, so you are not able to fulfill even 300 or 400 words. So just initially start writing, compare it with the topper's essay, and analyze your mistakes. Once you get in the practice of writing, and then another thing is to get your essays evaluated and go through the review. In mains, good evaluation and then analyzing the reviews that you're getting. That is the most important pillar of your preparation for mains, because it's a subjective exam and there's no fixed rule of what works and what does not work. So analyze that accordingly. So once you have written top essays on the toppers essay similar themes, then enroll in any test series program, or just there are a lot of sources to get essay questions. So just write an essay and get it evaluated. Do not skip evaluation. Even if you think that you are going to be the essay topper, do not skip evaluation. Just get your essays evaluated and go through the feedback again and again. If you feel that you're taking a lot of time, so writing essays is generally a 2-step process for most of the people that I have talked to. First step is brainstorming your ideas. So when you are brainstorming, write the topic at the center of the page, understand the various parts of the topic. Suggest one topic if you have any in mind. Feminization of agriculture. Okay, let's start with analyzing this topic, for example. So in this question, we have 2 keywords. One is feminization, second is agriculture. It is generally advised to start with an anecdote. Ensure that your anecdote covers the entire question. It's not just, your anecdote is not just about agriculture. You do not have to give the history of agriculture in the introduction, or just about feminization as a phenomenon. People with sociology optional might tend to write more on feminization. People in economics optional might write more on agriculture. Don't do that. Your introduction must introduce the entire topic. When there are questions of balance, for example, science boon or bane, it's a very basic question, won't be asked in UPSC, but for example, if it's a boon or bane question, don't just introduce with the positive parts. Use an anecdote to tell both sides of the story and then proceed with the essay. So the introduction must introduce the entire topic. This is a mistake that I used to make a lot. I would not introduce the entire topic, and changing this helps increase your marks. And next is to move to the other parts. When it comes to essay, like in Hindi, the essay is called Nibandh. It's not bound in any way. It is an expression of your thoughts, whatever you understand from the topic, whatever you can connect with the topic. So when it comes to writing the essay, try not to make it mechanical. It must have a natural flow. That is something that we often have problems in, because we think in silos. We think that I'll tell the economic aspects, then I'll tell the sociological aspects, I'll tell some of the political aspects, but we also introduce our sections. Politically, this is happening. Socially, this is happening. Do not do that. Connect the topics. For this, refer to the toppers' essays of how they are connecting the various sections of the essays, and use the ways that they have used. Experiment with them in your practice. That is why practice is important, so that you can experiment different ways. Some people use subheaders, like they'll have sociological aspects and then write. It's totally what feels comfortable to you. Personally, I felt that it made my essays very mechanical. So I would generally go in a flow. I did not mention it like that, and Whenever I had to connect one paragraph to another, I would just drop a hint about what is going to come next. Or I'll drop a quotation about what is going to come next, or a poem, anything which feels comfortable to you. So do not be mechanical in the essay. And okay, that is important enough to be written. And last but not the least is to end on an optimistic note. So you start with introducing the entire topic. Through the essay, you're not mechanical. When I say not mechanical, that means that you do not have to follow any specific recipe. We have this Pyqs technique, SP, ELC, IH, this is how I'll think, this is how I'll write. It's totally up to you. However your thoughts flow, just ensure that when you're not mechanical, then don't deviate away from the topic too much. We have the tendency that free sochna hai to we'll just write anything. It might make sense in your mind, but ensure that it has to make sense to the examiner as well. So one trick that can be used is to repeat the keywords of the topic again and again throughout your essay. It helps both of us. Like while we are writing, it helps us stick to the topic. Even while writing, we'll analyze that it's still near the topic itself. And for the examiner as well, if he's still wondering that, if he or she is still wondering where you are going with this, it will connect them to the topic as well, and they'll see it's related to the topic. So, okay, it's good. It works. So that is something that we need to do. And I was talking about brainstorming. So while brainstorming the essay, you can use Pyqs there, but don't use it while writing, because it helps to have some pillars while thinking of the topic. Take sufficient amount of time for brainstorming first. 15-20 minutes. Even in the exam hall, I spent 20 minutes on brainstorming each essay. And so just spend enough time on brainstorming first. While brainstorming, don't just write that I'll write on these themes, but what points do you plan to write on these themes? What are the examples that you plan to use? What are the quotations that you plan to use? And once you have done this, while writing the essay, try to stick to whatever you have thought. Because, and the structuring as well, like I'll start with an introduction, then I'll talk about this part, later on I'll talk about that part, and then I'll come to the counter aspect of this, like feminization of agriculture. Maybe it's I'm mostly talking about the positive aspect, or I have evidence to the contrary that agriculture is not actually being feminized. We are just seeing at a larger aspect, but there are like digressions to that trend in some pockets. So spend a little time on that, and then conclusion or solutions or whatever structure you have thought, mention that structuring in the brainstorming itself. And once you have completed the brainstorming, stick to that while writing the essay. And if you are able to do that, both time management and space management will be clear, and it will come with a lot of practice. So start practicing. 1 essay per week seems reasonable. Try to promise to yourself that you'll do that. Any doubts on essay?
Ma'am,
Yes?
in 2021, essays were a lot more theoretical. Philosophical, ma'am. What was your approach?
So philosophical essays have been my strong area. I have been very lucky in the exam. So it became my strong area because it was my weak area, and I practiced a lot of philosophical essays. Yet, in the exam hall, for the first 10 minutes, I was thinking, do I really have to write on these topics? And I also changed the theme in the brainstorming phase. Like I chose one topic first, and then I found out I do not have enough points on this. So then I switched the topic. But during the brainstorming phase itself, do it. And just that acceptance that the question paper is same for every one of us. Even the other person or the person who's going to get AIR 1 is having the same essay paper. So just have this acceptance and start writing. And practice both types of essays, technical and philosophical essays. Because the paper is becoming very unpredictable. Maybe this year they'll just ask all the technical questions. We do not know. And there are also ways of writing technical aspects in the philosophical essays. I did not experiment with those because I was not scoring well in those approaches. But in your mocks, you can experiment how to put more of the technical aspects in the philosophical essays. So try to experiment a lot with the essays. Anything else? Someone here? No? No doubts on essays? Everyone is going to be an essay topper? Honestly, no doubts. Okay, then let's move to GS1. So in GS1, any specific problem areas where you are afraid of or where you think you won't be able to prepare before we move ahead?
Some questions in geography are so open-ended that we are not able to write the conclusion. So have you written conclusion for every geography answer in GS1 or you just skip the conclusion?
Okay, so the question being asked is whether we, like even for the open-ended questions, do we have to write conclusion or can we skip it? The standard format of answering any GS paper is introduction, body, conclusion. The body will depend on the question, that we'll get to it now, but introduction and conclusion cannot be skipped. There are marks allotted for them. We do not have a specific idea of what exactly are the section wise marks, but if you skip on the introduction and conclusion, the examiner tends to think that you did not have sufficient time or you did not plan your space well, and that is why you have missed the conclusion. So in this case, it forms a negative perception. Do not skip the conclusion. In open-ended questions, I would just write the question in a statement format, hence this. It's done. So just even one line conclusion, but just put the conclusion over there. Don't leave it blank. So introduction, conclusion, okay. Then comes the body. So first just approach answer writing in GS in a general way. So when it comes to body, again, while practicing, have a pen while reading the paper, question, and underline the keywords that are appearing in the question. When you underline the keywords, you have an idea of what exactly is being demanded in the question and try to answer each and every demand. The demand is also highlighted in the directive words of the question. In the initial phase, we have doubts about what each of the directive words mean. Google directive words UPSC. There are several documents available which provide in detail about how you must answer or structure the answer for each of the directive words. Elucidate, explain, examine, critically examine, analyze. Some of these keywords are similar. Some have basic difference. So for example, if there is critical, then you have to write positive and negative both. If critical is not there, writing the negatives of that point is not necessary. So just go through those documents and try to put that into practice while writing your answers. So the directive word is very important. Next come the keywords in the question, underline them and try to address each of them. And try to give equal space to all parts of the question rather than just 1 point for each. And then comes the points versus paragraph format doubt. I used point format. Very few people these days use the paragraph format. One, because in paragraph you have to write a lot and we are unable to manage time for that. And second is, when writing in a paragraph, the examiner cannot at once see what all points you have written, how much content you have put. It looks like storytelling, and there is not marks for storytelling. Marks is for the to-the-point answers. So writing in point format, using underlines, you can put the words in a box. So formatting helps. Use subheaders in mains question. Like in essay, I said you can avoid subheadings, but in mains, you do have to use subheadings in any answer. And try to put them in a box. This significantly increased my marks in the mocks that I had attempted. So that is something that you can experiment, and I think it's better to just follow this subheadings thing, that identify the keywords. When it comes to subheadings in GS versus essay, in essay a lot of advice is given about creative subheadings. In GS, do not use your creativity. Use the keywords given in the question. just, you have underlined the keyword, use them in the question and write those subheadings as it is in your answers, and then go into a point-wise format for the answers. And this is just it. Any other answers on general approach? This one under attempting all of the questions or some questions. So my advice is attempt all 20 questions in the paper and try to fill all of the 50 pages in the question paper. How do you do that? Point format is one. Second is increasing of font size. Don't write very small text. There is a rule of 5 words in each line, 15 lines in each page. So it's approximately 75 words per page. You get 10 marks, 2 pages for 10 markers, 150 words approximately. So this fills the space and this fills the word quota, word limit that you have. So try to use this format, 5 words. You can skip a little bit, but don't, instead of 15, just writing 20 lines on a page, don't do that. So try to attempt all the questions, fill all the pages that are given there, use a lot of diagrams, flowcharts, and data wherever you have them. So these are some of the mark fetching tools. Just I'll let you know all the mark fetching tools subject wise in paper wise, but use them according to the paper. So any other on how to approach the paper? Any other doubt?
There is a very less time after prelims, just before meetings. So how can we organize our entire content? Like, should it be in the form of GS1, GS2, GS3, or what was your approach to organize the content of the entire year so that we can revise the same?
So my note making technique was to have it GS 1, 2, 3, 4 wise, but there are some topics that are connected across papers. So those topics I'd have with the other one. For example, I made IR and security notes side by side because I felt they were connected. You might not feel so. So it's, again, it's subjective according to you, and not all that I did was absolutely correct. Yet you can have a logical, having GS paper wise is helpful for revising, because when you have GS 1 and 2 tomorrow, so you will read the GS 1 portions and GS 2 portions. If they are present separately in your separate notebooks or wherever, then it becomes difficult to revise. And initially, as you pointed out, there is very little time between prelims and mains. So while preparing itself, initial phase, start preparing for mains as well. The answer writing, once you have completed the syllabus once, like the general completion of the syllabus, not very detailed analysis, because that way the syllabus is never complete. But once you have gone through the NCERT and the basic reference books, start writing answers. 2 questions a day, 3 questions a day, but start writing. And try to have a peer group based evaluation initially. When you start attempting tests, then you can have proper evaluations. There are also platforms that will evaluate your answers if you submit 2 or 3 questions a day. So you can look at those platforms as well. That is something I did. And attempting the questions repeatedly, and again on a daily basis, and analyzing the reviews that you're getting. Specifically in a peer group, the benefit of a peer group is that you can look at how others are approaching the same question. So that is something, if you are able to get a peer group, that will work the best for you. Daily answer writing is important, and subject section wise note making. For revision purposes, when between prelims and mains, what is advised is to have the parts that, there are several parts that will fetch you marks, and you tend to forget those parts. So in those parts, try to have separate notes for that. Like data in GS1 or GS3, have separate notes for that. I was unable to manage time, and there is also ready-made stuff. Like, I have a tendency that if someone else has done the hard work, I'll use my time for something else. So for GS3, GS2 cases, important cases, and things like that, I use ready-made compilations that are available. So try to go for those in GS2, 3. GS4, making own notes, I'll come to those papers. And any questions on general answer writing? No? Okay. Then let's come to GS1. So when it comes to GS1, first we'll start with history. Modern history is very important. Most of the questions in history come from modern history. So spectrum again, and go through the PYQs a lot. I tried to attempt almost all of the PYQs starting from 2013. In mains, going back 20 or 25 years is not advised for GS. 7 to 8 years of PYQs is enough. Solve all of the questions, and while attempting the PYQs, focus on structuring, identification of keywords, and how like management of space, putting diagrams. Try to practice that while answering this. And when it comes to ancient and medieval, these are not asked in mains. What is generally asked is art and culture. So prepare well. I prepared art and culture from Nitin Singhania. Practice the diagrams pretty well, and whatever the topics are being asked again and again. This recurrence of themes is important in both prelims and mains PYQ analysis. And okay, so we are done with history. Geography, very unpredictable, but geography is a subject where I refer to Shubham Kumar's answer copies. And what he used to do in questions that he did not have much to write on, he used to explain the answers using diagrams in the few copies that I referred to. So that is something that you can experiment with. Like when practice the diagrams in geography, and even when the diagrams are not given in the source that you are referring to, try to look at concept-based videos. From like for geography, there are some American websites, government websites that provide videos and how the phenomena is working. So in those they have conceptual diagrams, schematics. So try to practice some of those schematics if possible, and make practice them in your mock tests. So you drawing the diagrams, it covers a lot of space, and you do not have to spend much time in writing and explaining. So it saves time, fills the space, solves our problem. So that's something I did in geography. There is a lot of like variety of questions that we are often not able to prepare. This is something that helped. NCRT is what I kept referring to again and again in geography. And if there are topics that are often asked in PYQs, so you can just look them up online if they're not given in NCRT. For geography data, NCRT is out of date. Try to refer to the more recent data. There are compilations available for like human geography or economic geography. Just refer to other data sources and use the updated data. And society. Society is very much ignored when preparing for GS1, but society is where you can score the maximum number of marks. And for society, the preparation is very easy. So you are, have you all gone through the value-added material that Vision provides? For society, that material is more than enough if you cover it thoroughly. For that, I made notes out of GS1 society specifically chapters in from the value-added notes. Especially focusing on the definition of various themes. Have 2 or 3 definitions on your fingertips. If a question is asked, you will have at least 1 definition, if not 2 or 3. Whenever a topic is asked, you will mention the definition, and it also helps in understanding what the question means, because sometimes the question uses very random keywords. So in that case, understanding the keywords from the syllabus helps. So have definitions on your fingertips, have data points on your fingertips, and for society what matters is observing the society. So if there are examples, make notes of examples in society. For example, if there are questions on caste which are asked often, so have some examples of which are the examples where caste ideology is still propagating. What are the examples where caste ideology is no longer propagating, where we are becoming more equal or more homogeneous? So have separate examples for society and keep using them. And another thing in society is that you do not have to use very complicated examples in your GS paper. So you can also use for globalization, just mentioning that your pen is made in USA but you're writing in India, so it's an example of globalization. So even simple examples work, but try to put in a lot of examples. And then comes disaster management. So disaster management I prepared with GS3 because environment and disaster management, it felt like overlapping. For disaster management, there are specific compilations. Just refer to any one compilation of disaster management and focus on the points that are given, and just in answer writing, often comparison questions are there. Make tables for them, and so on. So any other question on GS1? current affairs to static part, wherever you are making the notes of the statics, mention if you find a data point that you feel relevant to a topic, just go back to the notes of your topic and mention that data point there. That is how you can connect. And using current affairs to connect to the static part is also important in the sense that if something is in the news in that year, it is more likely that it will be asked in the paper. So go and refer to the static concepts related to the topic. So that is how, these are the two ways in which you can connect your CA and your static preparation. Anything else?
The source.
It is advisable to mention the source of the data that you're using. So in this case, what I did was not to prepare a lot of data that I can't remember, but prepare such data that you can use in multiple questions, in multiple ways. Even within the same paper, you can repeat the same data point in several questions. And you can repeat the same data point over different questions, over different papers. So I used to practice quoting the data points in your mock tests. That comes with practice, and the data points that you use in the mock test are the only ones that you'll remember in the exam also. That is like mention the data as well as a source in bracket. You don't have to say according to ICMR study. Just say this bracket ICMR. That's enough. Anything else?
Ma'am, how to analyze this question paper while studying the topics of subjects?
While studying the topics of physics. So some institutes provide a topic-wise PYQ booklet where they'll separate all the questions from history, specific topics of history, specific topics of polity. So using that helps you to analyze what is the weightage of a given topic in the examination. For both prelims and mains, such compilations are available, and you can use them to first of all understand the weightage. If there is a topic which is taking a lot of your time in preparation but only one question is asked, you can skip. But when I say this, do not skip like post-independence history and world history, because after several years questions were asked in 2021. You do not have to go into a lot of depth for those subjects, but be aware about the general outline of the area, general knowledge about the subjects, because these are in the syllabus. So that is something, like just one question will be asked, so just have an idea that you are able to write something. Anything else? So now let's go to the sources for GS1. For world history, Shreyansh Kumar sir's notes on his Telegram channel, where he has made one-page mind maps of all the world history topics. That is the most important source. You can refer to that. For post-independence, refer to any one compilation. For people who have not yet started preparing, they can go through the book Ramchandra Guha's India After Gandhi. I read that before I started preparing, and that gives a very good idea of what was happening in the background. The foreground events we all know, but the background events we often tend to ignore, and that gives an idea, and that helped me connect it with various things, and I was able to quote examples while writing the post-independence answers. So those who have not started preparing can refer to Ramchandra Guha's book. Those who do not have time anymore, who have already started preparing, they can refer to any compilation of post-independence and go to the PYQs. Just you'll see that some themes are repeated again and again in the PYQs, so you can prepare strongly on those themes. For geography, again, just same sources are for pre and mains. Disaster management I have referred, history I've told the sources. Anything else that remains? No? Okay, then let's move to GS2. Okay, so here comes polity, for which number one, we have to read Lakshmikant, be very familiar with all that is given, make notes or do not make notes, but revise multiple times from the book. Attempt a lot of PYQs. In GS2, my only strength in that paper was to attempt a lot of the PYQs. I attempted each and every PYQ in GS2, barring I think 3 or 4 questions from 2013 to 2020. So attempt all the questions, and while attempting, focus on the structures, put in the examples right there, and put in the case studies, data points, everything right there, and revise the answers, because in GS2 UPSC has a tendency of repeating the questions. Plus there are limited themes in GS2. So specifically governance and social issues. How to prepare governance and social issues? I did not refer to any separate book on these themes, but for these I use the, again, value added material of vision. These are bulky, so between pre and mains you won't be able to refer to it completely. In peer groups, divide topics, make notes out of it and circulate it among yourselves. So that will help you to prepare well from the value added material. You can, while making notes, just focus on the parts that you'll be able to use in your answers, the definition, the data points, the diagrams that are given there. Be creative. Refer to Topo's answers, and because they are also using a lot of flow charts. In GS2 and all, we have less creativity on how to use diagrams. So using others' answers helps in this case. So that is something that can be done. Now coming to international relations and how to use mains 365. In international relations, while solving the PYQs, prepare answers as if the question was asked in this year. So the mains 365 provides very detailed analysis on like all the data and all the concepts that are related to the topic. Everything is provided in detail. Specifically for international relations, all my answers I prepared from the mains 365. Go through it thoroughly and there will be new topics apart from the ones that are in the PYQs. So you have seen the news. The topics that are more frequently asked in news are more likely to be in the examination paper. So prepare a few questions on those topics as well. You can, after you have attempted a lot of PYQs, you have an idea of what kind of topics are asked, what kind of questions are asked from any given topic. So on those dimensions, prepare some pointers for those topics as well. That helps. We have done polity, governance, international relations. Anything else that remains? Economics is GS3. Government schemes is in governance itself. So government schemes, I did not make separate notes for it, but I used compilations for government schemes as well in governance section. Specifically, like when you're answering a question, you can search on what schemes are available on the given question and mention, like make a note of them alongside your PYQs. I have shared my GS2 PYQ solutions on my Telegram channel, so you can also refer to that on how to practice, how to get the best use out of your PYQ practice. Any other questions on GS2? Most of us are not in the preparation phase for mains, I think. Any other questions? Yes?
Ma'am, for the polity you have mentioned about the Lakshmikant. I have heard most of the toppers talks and most of the recommendations of the seniors have said to read the D.D. Basu. And I am in the dilemma, which book should I refer, Lakshmikant or in D.D. Basu?
I'd recommend just browsing through a few pages of D.D. Basu. If you are someone like me, D.D. Basu would seem very, very difficult, and I did not touch D.D. Basu after that. Lakshmikant is given in a very easy to understand and easy to memorize format, because what is required for the examination, to the point things are given. So I refer to Lakshmikant. If D.D. Basu feels comfortable, you can refer to it.
And one more question regarding the amendment of the Indian Constitution. What you have done for this?
There is a compilation. As I said, if someone else has done the hard work, I tend not to do it myself. So there are compilations available for important amendments of the Constitution. While answering any given question, if there is an amendment related to that theme, I'll try to make a note in that question, in the answer itself. Like while writing and after writing and getting it evaluated, I would also try to look at the points that I could have added in this answer. So I'll go back to these sources and mention whatever is there, and like if there are any important amendments related to that theme, I'll mention them there itself and revise them.
And one thing you have also mentioned about the Telegram channel that you have made and where you have write about your sources, whatever you have used. So please, would you like to share with all us? Thank you.
So this is basically my first name underscore my last name underscore my rank. Shreya Shree 71. This is my Telegram channel where I have been posting stuff, but so let's move on to any other doubts in GS2? No? Okay, then let's move to GS3. So in GS3 is the paper where I have scored the least marks in mains, and it remained ignored for me. That is a lesson for everyone because it coincided with my optional. I thought I'm preparing for economics optional, so with that I'll prepare for this, and it remained incomplete mainly because of that. So that is something, even if your optional is coinciding with the GS paper, do not take it lightly. Don't repeat my mistakes. So give separate time for this. For economics, when preparing for GS, focus on conceptual clarity, because there were several questions asked on basic definitions, how the definition of GDP has changed. That was one of the questions. So in these questions, conceptual clarity matters a lot. You can refer to any source you want to. I have gone through a book by Vivek Singh, economy book. So you can refer to that, or you can refer to any other source that you feel comfortable. Just have a good grasp on the concepts. Second is data. In GS3, data matters a lot. So for economy specifically, try to quote as much of data as possible and make separate notes of it. GS3 data compilation is available. In fact, Vision publishes it a few weeks before your mains. So there is time to revise and memorize it. Try to go through that. And conceptual clarity is what matters the most in economy when it comes to mains. Next, any doubts on economy here? Yes?
So just one doubt. So when we read newspaper on regular basis, there are certain, when you see datas as well as in the explained section, editorial section. So there are certain topics which are directly related to the GS3 course, be it economics or science and technology. Should we make notes out of that editorial or should we go for the compilation?
Again, it's up to you. I did not make notes. In my first attempt, I did try making notes and I was not able to revise that, which is why I do not recommend making notes anymore. You can make notes if you feel like it. In case of economics, I had a strength that I had economics optional, so my conceptual clarity was there. For those who do not have an economics background, they might need to make notes for this. Like having definitions of all the keywords in the syllabus or all the keywords that have been asked in the past years is very important. So do whatever feels best. Having notes of definitions certainly would help. Again, with the notes, with the definition itself, if you mention the data, if you mention the linkages. When it comes to economics, what also matters is referring to the exact topics that are given in the syllabus. So prepare exactly on the themes that are given in the syllabus. We often miss out on a few of those topics. So do prepare notes on this or refer to compilations on this. Anything else related to economy?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
As you have already economics optional, is there any difference between dealing questions of GS3 or economics optional question?
There is a lot of difference. I think that will happen in all the GS and optionals that overlap. So when you are answering a GS question, it demands more of interlinkages among the subjects in GS, and it is okay if you give a generalized answer because you are not assumed to be an expert in the field. So a generalized answer is okay, but if you specialize it, it's better. But when it comes to answering the optional questions, you cannot answer them in a general way. When you're answering questions in optional, you have to use the keywords, the jargons of the field. You have to, in case of economics, you have to mention the economists that have worked in the field. You have to mention a few papers that have been published in the field, or cite a few papers, cite data, cite specific data, or like detailed analysis, critical analysis of the field. So when it comes to optional, your answer tends to be more specialized, and when in GS, it can be a little bit general. There's no penalty on that, but if you have specialized answers, then of course you'll get some extra marks for that. Any other doubts? No. Next we come to environment in GS3. Environment was my least prepared area, and that is why I do not generally give much advice on environment. So for that, please refer to those who have scored better than me in GS3. And basic understanding is of course important. What I did in GS3 environment specifically was to refer to the mains 365 and the topics that are asked often. And I prepared the definitions and pointers for those. And that did help, but it remained. And in case of environment, there are also a lot of unexpected questions. So one thing that you'll need to practice is how to approach the questions that you have not seen before. For example, asking the exact guidelines from 5 years ago, that's something no one will have prepared. So what will you write in such questions? So that is something that you need to work on in GS3 specifically. Then comes SNT. In science and tech, I only refer to the compilations, and preparing them in more detail could have helped. I was unable to recall a lot of things there, so preparing them in more detail can help. And next is, what does remain in GS3? Science and tech I've just mentioned. Internal security. I prepared it with the international relations paper. In internal security, do prepare it again theme-wise, because theme-wise questions are asked more often these days. And while make notes for security because it's scattered everywhere. In security, also prepare diagrams for the various topics. Have a lot of government schemes on your fingertips. So these are the things that will help you fetch marks in GS3 generally. Again, for GS3, I'd seriously recommend you to refer to those who have scored better than me, because I did not score very well in GS3. So anything else in GS3? Disaster management, prepare it from any compilation that is available. So anything else? Practice a lot of PYQs, that matters in every paper. Do solve a lot of PYQs. Anything? So we are done with GS3. Now comes GS4, highly ignored area, but where you can score a lot of marks. For GS4, the first, again, the themes the pointers that are useful in essay are useful in GS4. Try not to be mechanical and understand the whole question and approach the entire question in ethics. Direct questions are not asked anymore. In the earlier years, they would just ask a definition and some examples, and that would have been enough. But these days, direct questions are not asked. So prepare them. For ethics, all the keywords that are given in the syllabus, prepare them well. The definitions, examples, types of examples, personality-based example, case study-based examples, examples from your personal life, prepare in various categories for them. When there are questions in ethics which are unexpected, like where you are unable to find the contours of how you should approach the answer, try to think in terms of the values that are mentioned in the syllabus. So in that way, we are able to approach the answer better when we do not have any idea of where to start. Using the values that this particular thing is related to this value, or this particular example is related to this value in this way. Quotations in ethics. Personally, I think quotations helped me a lot in the ethics paper, because in all of the questions, I tried to conclude with a quotation. And again, in the quotation-based questions specifically, in the general theory-based questions, I used at least one quotation, and in the quotation-based questions where you have to explain what the quotation means to you, in those questions I would refer to 2 or 3 quotations, mention them along with a thinker if possible. If I do not remember the thinker, then the quotation itself, and I would connect the quotation with other quotations and use them. So that helped. So my approach towards quotations was that I made consolidated notes for various quotations for essay and ethics together. Available on my channel again, but preparing them together helped me in both the papers, as you have to mention a lot of quotations in both the places, and even in case studies. I use these. So that is something that is like high returns on your investment. You can use my notes and add onto your notes. And then there are examples. For this, personality-based examples are very useful in your ethics theory-based questions specifically. There are 13 questions, and having personality-based examples helps. And again, you can use my compilation of examples and follow. Then comes diagrams. In ethics, we have a tendency, like we have a difficulty in making diagrams out of concepts because we are reading the concepts for the first time ever. Ethics we have never read in our life generally. So in this case, Shubham Kumar sir's notes on his diagrams. It's available on his channel, and that is something I referred to the night before my GS4 exam and reproduce the diagrams exactly in the paper, and it helps. So if you can't create your own diagrams, just refer to anyone else, and Shubham Kumar sir's notes are excellent in this field, so that is something you can do. Now this is how to approach the questions, theory-based questions. Now preparing for the theory-based questions. Make your own notes. In GS4, there are several sources, and having your own notes helps. So my own notes, if you look at them, some have also mentioned that it seems like a very compressed version of the value-added material of vision, which it is. I referred to the topic-wise themes in vision value-added material and made notes on this. So you can just refer to my own to have a and add on whatever parts you have missed, or you can refer to any other source that you want. So that is one thing that you have to do. Make your own notes, put examples alongside them, put your diagrams that you plan to use alongside them, and that is very important. Any doubts on how to make notes or anything in GS4? How to make notes? So first of all, refer to the types of questions that are being asked. You'll notice that you need to mention the definitions. So whenever you are reading a chapter, highlight the definition, put that in your notes. That is firstly important. Then we also have, in ethics, generally structuring becomes difficult in theory-based question. We do not know how to identify the parts of a question. So in these cases, the types of, like when you are reading the theory, for example, in attitudes chapter, we have a CAB model, CAB, cognitive, affective, and behavioral. So you have, so when you remember the parts of this, or for emotional intelligence, there are 5 parts or there are 6 parts. So when you have these parts in your hand, you are able to structure your answer. So definition and whatever theoretical parts are given, that can be used for structuring your answer. These 2 things must be remembered. And most importantly, any philosophers who have spoken on that or written on that theme. Quoting the philosophers is very important in essay, and because in 2020, I referred to Divya Mishra ma'am's answer copies. She had philosophy optional. She scored the highest marks in, second highest marks in ethics. The highest got only 1 mark more than her. So, and her paper had abundance of philosophers. We do not have to go in that mode because not all of us can prepare philosophy in that depth, but try to do it as much as possible. So at least 1 philosopher in each question, try to go for that. Any other doubts? For ethics? Online websites and I planned to, but I could not manage the time. I just referred to the compilations generally. In topics where I had a doubt, I would just Google, and whatever websites popped up, I'd go through them. Just ensure that the websites that you're reading provide the original news, that are verified websites, rather than the websites that are not verified, because on unverified websites, there is a chance that you are getting the wrong facts. So just ensure that whatever sites you are referring to has some authority behind it. Just that thumb rule is enough, and refer to compilations that is more targeted towards your UPSC demands. Anything else? Yes, I'm coming to that. In ethics theory-based question, any other doubts? No? Okay, so we come to case study. In case study, the issue is generally like when you are approaching case study for the first time, we are given a template of answering. Like first write an introduction which might contain the definition, then you have to mention the stakeholders, then you have to write the values associated with the question, and then go on to the parts of the question. So that format is not necessary for the exam. Intro, body, conclusion, this format is essential in all GS papers, 1, 2, 3, 4, including ethics. But even in case study, you have to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. But the monotonous format should be avoided. In GS4, one has to work a lot on avoiding monotony because there are only 2 types of questions asked. 13 10-marker questions and then 6 questions of case studies. So if you have the same pattern, same approach of answering the case study, the examiner might get bored while checking your copy and you might be awarded less marks. So try to keep him or her interested in your answer copy. For that, one step was to answer to the point, whatever questions are being asked. My approach was to start with an introduction. If the question requires stakeholders, I'll draw the stakeholders diagram. If the question does not require stakeholders, I would skip mentioning the stakeholders there. Again, with the values, if it is explicitly asked in the question, I'd mention 4 or 5 values associated with the question. But if values are not explicitly asked, I'll just write in a sentence 1 or at most 2 values that are associated with the question. So try to have a focused, targeted approach to writing the answers in ethics and in case study. And once you have a targeted way of writing the answer, avoid monotony, use a lot of formats. For example, use subheadings, that is basic, point-wise format. You can use boxes to like draw a diagram of the values associated. Again, referring to, I have mentioned some of the toppers copies that help me in this experimenting with format on my channel, so you can refer to those copies as well. They give a very good idea of how to experiment in your, try to avoid monotony, and I think this will be enough. For GS, for case studies, practice a lot of case studies. For those sources, one is the PYQs. In the recent years, the PYQs are getting more and more complicated and lengthier. So this targeted thing helps. Number one, because if you are only answering the parts of the question, you are able to manage time. And the second thing is a variety of questions and themes. So my approach was to prepare fodder keywords that I'll be using in the case study. These are available on my channel. I have made a list of the keywords that I'll use in any given theme. And after the keywords are given, just practice a lot of variety of questions. And based on the type of question that is being asked, again, there are several compilations available. Vision compilation on 80 case studies. It provides the format. Do not follow the format because it does not provide a format for writing the answers, but it provides good fodder on content in the case studies. So use the content from there, make notes out of it, use the case studies given there, so use that. When it comes to introduction in case studies, 2 general types of introductions are used. One is the definition of the thing that is occurring there. Second is any real life example that you can relate to it, or there is a third variety where you have a GS2 type of introduction. So all 3 works. Try not to have the same type of conclusion, introduction in all the case studies. Mix it up, switch it up. That is one. For conclusion, optimistic conclusion is important. If and using quotations does help. I try to conclude with quotations in most of the case studies. If you can't find the time, just write 1 sentence, but do not skip on the conclusion even in case of case studies. It becomes confusing what to write in case study conclusion. So I used to generally take the help of the last sub part asked in the case study. So that would help in making the conclusion. Any other questions on case study? I think more questions will arise when we practice. Just try to practice a lot of case studies. Anything else? So, in general, overall GS preparation, any doubts for mains? Yes.
Can you tell your like yearly strategy, which how many months did you go for each subject or something like that?
Okay, I did not form a yearly strategy. My focus was generally to complete the syllabus as much as possible, and like I have a tendency to not being able to stick to one subject for long periods of time. I get bored, so I would just pick a subsection. I did not try to target ethics at one go. I'd first pick up 2 chapters, foundational values and introduction to ethics. So these 2 chapters I'd pick it up, I'd complete making the notes of it. If possible, attempt some questions from these topics. Then I'll move on to GS 1, 2, 3 or my optional. Then after that, I'll come back to ethics. So I used to do it in this way because making things interesting is important. And another benefit of mixing up the preparation of various papers is that you are able to create interlinkages in the themes available in various papers, and that is something that really helps in your answers, because that is how you create a difference between your answers and the answers that someone else must be writing. You're not just limited to that topic, but you are able to quote examples or use concepts from a different topic and structure your answers, so that can help. Anything else?
Ma'am, can you please share time management techniques while writing GS answer? As I find it very difficult to manage to write all the answers.
Okay, so initially, time management practice, I started to write from the beginning. Even while writing my first few answers, I would just start with a timer in hand. While writing the answer, initially I just used to do, I read the question. I did not usually know the answer, so I would go back to the theme, to the source material, read it from the source material, close it, and start the timer, write the entire answer, whatever time it took. And make a note of the time you're taking. Initially, this time has to be reduced because our writing speed is initially pretty slow. So initially I did that. Afterwards, like after a month or 2 months of writing in this way, I started not to refer to the source material and then write the answers. So again, the time increases after this because you have to remember all of the points on your own. So again, the time increases, try to decrease the time, and like per question timing, if it's a 10-marker question, you have to mention this. And the third stage in this time practice was that I would put a like 7-minute stopwatch, after which it will ring a bell. And after that, I would not write, or I'd mark a line and then write. So I'd know that in an exam format, if I have only 7 minutes for this answer, I'd only be able to complete until this part. So it will not give me enough marks. So initially it is this for 1-2 questions when you're writing. And when you come to FLTs, for the first time when you're attempting all the 20 questions, use any app of exercise timer. I was a self-study student. I did not come here for the mock tests. So I did all of this at home, so it was feasible for me. I used an exercise timer for interval training apps. So in those, I had set 10 intervals of 7 minutes each for the 10-marker questions, and then 10 intervals of 11 minutes each, 10 minutes each for the 15-marker question. So this is a total of 170 minutes, and target finishing the paper in 170 minutes. Because again, 5 to 10 marks will go for the all the formalities that the invigilator does. Sometimes the paper is distributed after the bell rings in several centers. So if you practice to write within 170 minutes, you will be able to finish it in the exam hall. If you have a practice of 180 minutes, it might get difficult. So, and like now you have set the timer, you've started writing the questions. Again, as I said, you have to attempt all of the questions. Whether you know it or not, just write whatever you can think of at the moment. And when the bell rings for the end of the time of a question, maximum write 1 sentence of conclusion after it and turn over the page, or just turn over the page. Practicing turning over the page as the alarm rings helps in time management. Even during my actual mains examination, I was allowed only a wristwatch in the exam, but there was a huge wall clock over there. So I was monitoring the time that I'm taking per question. If I was exceeding the time, like I had blocks of time, in 35 minutes I'll finish the first 5 10 markers. So if I was exceeding it in the subsequent questions, I would try to, again, within 70 minutes I have to finish the 10 markers. So that is something that you have to practice. Even in the exam hall it is possible. Most of the exam halls have a clock for that purpose. Anything else? Nervousness and anxiety, yes, that is a very important question. Thank you for asking. Nervousness, two parts. One is in the preparation stage, and second is during the exam hall. So first of all, dealing with the preparation stage. We are generally afraid whether we will be able to do it or not, or the syllabus is difficult, we score less marks in the mocks. It does not matter, okay? Even if you're scoring less marks in the mocks, it does not matter. What matters is what you're going to score in the actual exam. So while preparing, the funda is that if you're scoring less, try to focus on your weak areas. And if focusing on your weak areas is giving you too much anxiety, then shift your focus to your strong areas. Like, these areas are strong. If anything comes to me, I'm an expert here. I can deal with it. So if I can deal with the strong areas, what did I do for those? I studied them well maybe, or I had studied them in the past. So just use what you did there for strengthening your weak areas. That is one way of improving your confidence. For me personally, it was like if I have a weak area, I would be nervous, and then if I made it stronger, if my marks improved in that specific area, then my confidence level would automatically go up. Or I would talk to others, and like others are also feeling nervous, so we'll chalk out a strategy together and hold each other accountable for completing that syllabus. So that is something that also helps. So like try to remove your weak areas. Second is the anxiety of what if I don't get through. UPSC is not everything. Even if we do not get through this, there are other options available. But if we do not want to look at anything else, if we want to stick to UPSC, even then, worrying will not solve anything. Worrying only takes away the time from our preparation. And even if we are sitting in front of the book and worrying, the time that you should be spending in learning the concepts is going into useless thoughts. So it does not solve any problem. So that is something that helps to not worry about it. Again, easier said than done. Third is when you have difficulties and you want to quit. Nahi karna aur. For that, what motivated me was that I had chosen the field myself. I skipped everything else that was possible for me, all the other avenues of career, and tried to prepare for UPSC. It was my choice. While making the choice, I was conscious that there will be difficulties. And this is something that helped me. Like, I was holding myself accountable that I chose it for myself, so I'll have to bear with the difficulties on my own. And having this thought process did help. And so we have tackled with the anxiety part in the preparation stage. Now coming to anxiety during the exam hall. One mantra is, do not think that this is the exam that will decide my entire life. It will not. That is fact. And in the exam hall, just consider it as one of your mocks. I have given a lot of mocks. I did well in a lot of them. Just have faith. On that day, do not think of what you have not prepared. Think of your strong areas on that day. So I have attempted a lot of mocks. This is just another exam. I can do it. I can do it pretty well. And even if pretty well is not coming, I'll just complete it. I'll give my best and then let's see. So that attitude helps, and having a positive attitude in the exam hall actually helps you recollect more of the things that you have studied. Anything else? Mm-hmm. So yeah, my general advice is that in your first iteration of studying a topic, do not make notes. In the first iteration, we are unable to understand anything. So if we make notes, we'll just be copying out the books. In your second or third iteration, start making notes. If it's a very new topic, then you just read it once, underline it, and then on the second study, you have underlined portions, read it again, and the underlined portions, make notes out of those. So second or third iteration is the ideal time. Do not make notes on everything again. By the second iteration, you will have an idea of the areas that you need to make a note on. So that helps. Anything else?
Ma'am, when will be the right time for making short notes? And The second question is, should we make another notes apart from the class notes topic wise after reading the standard books and value added material? Because sometimes we feel that the class notes have not sufficient, we should add in that. So should we refer another copy, making another book for that?
Okay, so on the first question, when should we start making short notes? For prelims, my short notes were from the mock test that I had been attempting. I did not attempt any foundation course. So my short notes were from the mock test that I was attempting, and those were the only notes I referred to for prelims. And some theme-based notes, as I mentioned earlier, from the recurrent themes that are spread up across multiple sources. And for mains, the ideal time for making short notes is between prelims and mains, because at that point of time, you will have mostly completed the syllabus, or you will have done as much of syllabus completion as you can do for that given attempt. So between prelims and mains is the ideal time for short notes. Again, in these short notes, try to keep it as small as possible, possibly 40 A4 pages for one paper. That is the most you can revise, because in GS papers, for GS 3 and 4 suppose, you only have like until 5 PM you have the exam on this evening. It will be 6 or 6:30 by the time you get home. And the next day 9 AM paper is there, where you have to report at 8:30. So there will be very little time for you to revise. So make short notes very short, as short as possible. And having your notes in digital format helps, because I used to just screenshot portions and put it in a separate place. So it avoided reduplication of efforts for me, or just highlighted stuff from my own notes and then refer to the highlights the day before the exam. Using on the question of separate notes apart from the class notes, that is a question I will be unable to answer, because I do not have any class notes as a base. But a general funda would be to add it there itself. Avoid reduplication of efforts, avoid making of rough notes and then fair notes. Just have extra space over there, or use A4 sheets, clip it over there and mention whatever extra you have. So do not try to like optimize the efforts that you're putting in the exam. You have limited time, and make the best use of the time.
Then optimistic. Ma'am, does ending answer in optimistic tone apply to those questions as well, in which we are asked to analyze critically?
So yes, generally, see, the exam is not only testing your knowledge of the field, but also your attitude. Because when in the field, unless you have a positive attitude towards things, you will not be able to change things. You will not be able to improve it for better. So in this case, like ending your answers in an optimistic note would imply that despite all the difficulties in the field, you can look at the ray of sunshine. So I tried to end all my answers in an optimistic note. In critical analysis, what I did was start with the positives, then write the negatives, and then in the conclusion, just reconnect with the positives, like reconnect the difficulties with the positives. Like despite this, this can be done, these are being done. Some positive examples, case study, use them for conclusion. Like you can have, there's a lot of creativity possible for the conclusion. You can have some ready-made conclusions if you want to, so that can help. Optional and GS. Okay, we'll come to that. There was another question there. Yes.
Ma'am, the iterations which you have mentioned before regarding notes making, so were you talking about like making notes in that same particular chunk, or like repicking the subject at later period of time?
Both, like depending on when I come back to the topic. Generally, like I studied few topics of GS4, then GS3, then whenever I come to GS4, I'll add my notes over there itself. And when you're, when specifically talking about the iterations, first and second iteration, I'd recommend doing it one after another, like simultaneously. Because after first iteration, you have a slight idea of what is given in the source material. If you read the second iteration in continuity, For example, in my optional preparation, I did not go through the entire syllabus once and then came for the second iteration. My approach was to study one chapter. It would take me a few days, and then the second iteration would take me 1 day for each chapter. So I would go back to the chapter, read it, and make notes out of it, diagrams and whatever is needed. So first and second iteration simultaneously. The third iteration, I would refer to my notes, and if something, it would come after a time. Like for example, I have prepared all the notes from microeconomics, and then I'll refer to my notes of microeconomics, and I'll if I spot something that is not explained within my notes, I'll refer to the source material again and add it, or refer to topper's notes again and add from there. Value additions will be there in the third iteration of preparation. So the iterations can depend on your comfort. This is how I did it. Okay, optional and GS. Any other questions before that about GS or general preparation? No. Okay, so let's move to optional preparation. One mistake again that you should not repeat is to prepare optional. Like, I did not prepare optional beforehand, so a lot of my Eco 2 syllabus remained incomplete and I had to run behind it between prelims and mains. So what can instead be done is to prepare your optional beforehand. At least read and make the notes once beforehand, and in the second or third iterations you can do value addition for your optional notes. So do not repeat this mistake or leaving the optional for the end. Again and again, if an optional overlaps with your GS paper, again, don't take it for granted. Prepare that GS paper as well separately. Dividing time between GS and optional. Again, it will depend on what your optional is. For optional like economics, it took a lot of time in preparing. If you focus initially on preparing optional, if you're done with the notes once, then you can have just a small chunk of time for revision and then prepare. But if a lot of things are incomplete, then you'll have to spend longer time for optional. For me, I did GS and optional simultaneously, so not on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis, I tried to give 50-50 time for optional and GS. The balance obviously changed. If I was enjoying optional in a certain week, then I'd give more time for that. So that is totally up to you. Just focus on completing the syllabus. That is the most important. And PYQs, again, for optionals like economics, PYQs are very important. Anyone with economics optional here? Okay, we do have some of them in the crowd. Very good. So I'll just give a basic outline of economics optional, and we'll discuss the questions later on. For economics optional, the standard sources are there for Eco Paper 1. Refer to the standard books. I have provided the list on my channel. Again, make your own notes. Practice the diagrams a lot. You have to make a lot of graphs in the exam, and that is essential. And secondly, for Eco 2, current affairs is very, very important. So preparing topic-wise notes and current affairs would help in your economics optional preparation. Any other doubts I'll address separately, and any basic doubts on the entire thing? GS, optional, prelims, essay, nothing? Any general doubts, any thoughts that you're having?
Ma'am, in paper 1, if we consider HL Ahuja microeconomics book, here ma'am, there are a lot of repetitions and graphs are sometimes wrong there also.
Yes.
How to tackle with it, ma'am?
So what I dealt with was try to understand how the graphs are made rather than just copying them from the exam, from the book. How the graphs are made, what is the theory that goes behind it. If it does not match up, then obviously there's a mistake. I refer to some of the previous toppers' notes in that case. Some people also use some specialized economics optional coaching, so you can go for that. Yes? Okay. Anything else?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
In paper 2, what about pre-independence part? How to go with it, ma'am?
So pre-independence is one of the areas where it is static in nature. Tirthankar Roy's book is sufficient. Make notes out of it and revise from your own notes. These, in the recent years, the trend has been for analytical questions where they ask for comparison on various things. So try to prepare your notes such that they are easy to compare in a point-wise format. In general, your note making must be in the format in which you are going to write your answers. I had planned to write my answers in a point-wise format, so my notes were in a point-wise format. If you plan to write in a paragraph way, try to make your notes in a paragraph way. Anything else? Yes?
I just started the preparation, so I think I have to do all at once, or what? All subjects at once, or per subject?
So when you have just started, start with optional preparation, but don't give all of your time for optional. Start with the basic books one by one. Like, you can't do everything at once. At any given point of time, you will be reading one specific book. When you have picked a topic, try to do 2 iterations of the topic at the same time. And when I say topic, it's a topic, it's not a subject. If your brain is exhausted by the topic, move on to a topic from another subject. Try to switch it up. The preparation has to be interesting and productive for you. So that is important. You can use whatever sequence, but ensure that your syllabus is complete.
Now we are having classes of geography and modern history, so I can go with that too.
It's up to you. You surely can.
Ma'am, in graph section, precision matters or just rough graph matters, ma'am?
Precision. When you comes to economics optional, your precision matters in the graphs.
What about data and trend, ma'am, in paper 2? Go for trend or data?
Trend. If memorizing the data for everything is impossible, go for the trends. Anything else? Okay, there is a question here. Yes?
Ma'am, for daily study plan, how should I divide my time for different subjects for newspaper, GS and optional?
Okay, so daily study plan. One general question is the number of hours and how to divide those hours. For the number of hours, as many as possible, but your possibility must not be limited to 3, 4 or 5. The range of possibility is very broad. It must ensure that you do not compromise with your health. The number of hours that you put into your preparation must be sustainable on a long run basis. UPSC is a marathon, not a race. So ensure that the number of hours you're putting in is sustainable on a long run basis. Dividing your time between GS, optional, prelims, mains, newspapers. Newspapers take a lot of time, for especially in the beginning phase. I totally avoided newspapers for prelims and mains preparation because I was unable to manage time with that. It is your choice what you are going to do. So do what, for me, compilations worked. Choose whatever works for you. Dividing between GS and optional, again, depending on how vast your syllabus is, how familiar you are with the themes. Ensure one way of making effective use of the time that you're putting in is to have daily or at least weekly targets. At the beginning of the day, chalk out what you plan to do and how many hours will you take, and make realistic estimates. Don't think that I'll complete modern history in a day. That's not going to happen. So make realistic targets and then try to follow through. And if you are unable to follow through your targets, analyze that why you were unable to, why were the targets incomplete, and then accordingly readjust your targets for the next day. And a targeted study plan would help. The targets can be your own. They can depend on the courses that you're taking, whatever subject is going on in the class. Try to study the source material a day before the topic is covered in the class. So that helps retention. So these are some things you can make the best use of the limited time that you're putting in and a long run basis, and ensure that your health is not compromised. Again, the day versus night studying. We do have a tendency of studying late in the night and rather than early in the morning. when the exam draws closer, this tendency generally harms rather than helps. So I studied at home. My approach was to limit, like I had a bedtime of 11 to 12, maximum 12:30. Just whatever you have done or it is incomplete, just wrap it up for the day. Wake up early next morning and study, because the exam schedule is between 9 to 12 and 2 to 5 for mains, right? And this is the general 9 to 5 is the general window of time in which you have to write the exam. So that is the time frame where you must ensure that your brain is the most active. And that happens over the entire year. If you are unable to, if you have the habit of sleeping in this time, your brain won't be active in the exam also. Just ensure that your daily sleep cycle and everything is aligned with the exam. Anything else? No more questions? And I'll just give one general funda more. Be honest with yourself throughout the preparation. You're not preparing for anyone else. You're preparing for yourself. You will reap the benefits of the result that will come out of it. So when on the day when the results are announced, we must not have the regret, if I had done this or if I had done that. That should not happen. So just be honest with yourself. Put in everything that you can. It is possible to clear in the first attempt. It is possible to clear in the second attempt itself. If you have given attempts already, analyze the mistakes that you made in your previous attempts and work according to plan. So this is the basic funda. Anyone wants me to talk about the interview preparation right now or later on? You. Should we start with interview? Interview preparation is the most exciting part of the exam, because number one, the goal seems very close at that point of time. And interview preparation is also interesting, because in pre and mains, we generally have more of a secluded approach. We have to study on our own. But in interview, our interaction skills are put on test. How we convey our ideas, how we think in a short frame of time and speak, and our interpersonal skills. These are all put to test. And when you come to interview preparation after pre and mains, it is also refreshing, because you get to talk to a lot of people when you go for mock interviews, online, offline, whatever mocks you're taking. So that becomes very exciting. And when it comes to interview, again, the basic funda of DAF, like in pre and mains, we had to prepare each of the keywords from the syllabus. UPSC defines the syllabus for prelims and mains, but for interview, you define your own syllabus. The DAF that you fill out, filling the DAF is very exciting, by the way. So just put in a lot of effort in pre and mains, because after prelims, you get to fill DAF 1, and after mains, you get to fill DAF 2. So just put a lot of energy in pre and mains, and initially do not think about the interview. But once you get to fill the DAF, that is a very exciting process. You are able to analyze what have you done in your whole life. It can also be like trigger for introspection. What have I done with my life? But so filling the DAF is exciting, and the DAF defines the syllabus that you'll have for the interview. The interview preparation is generally preparing everything, every keyword in your DAF, starting from the meaning of your name to the place that you live in, even keywords in your address, home address. So things like that, the subjects that you have taken, everything, your hobbies, your parents' names, your parents' professions, your past job experience, everything is the syllabus for your interview, apart from the current affairs, which is there in every phase of the exam. So preparing for the interview is exciting, and appearing for the interview is also very exciting, because number one, you get to take the picture outside of UPSC Bhavan. So only one way to enter there, get an interview call. So prepare well for prelims and mains. That is very exciting. And the day of the interview, it's a culmination of your years of efforts. And the UPSC panel is very cordial. My experience specifically was that the panel members did not want to attack me on anything. If I was not comfortable answering questions of a given area, I just had to honestly put it before them that I'm unable to recall this, or I do not have complete knowledge of this field, and they would just skip on to the next field. They wanted us to communicate. In prelims and mains, they are there to reject you. But when you get to the interview stage, they've called you with all pomp and show over there. They are there to select you. So the interview is not brutal. There is a misconception, ye pooch denge, wo pooch denge. It's not like that. The interview is very cordial. They ensure that you are comfortable. They ensure that your strong areas are asked. They ensure that you are comfortable and you put on your best side in front of them. So interview is a very different ball game from prelims and mains, and I do hope that all of you get to sit for the interviews very soon. Any other questions?
Can you recall any question you have been asked in the interview?
A lot of them. My interview started with asking about a basic introduction with focus on my academic and my work experience background. So I enlisted my academic and work background, and then there were follow-up questions on the internships that I had done. I do not have any job experience before this, but my internships were interesting and they asked me a question regarding that. And I had expected that there would be a lot of economics-based question because my education was in economics, my optional is economics, and economics was always in the news. But most of my questions were asked from international relations, social media, polity, and my DAF, like the extracurricular activities that I had done. Economics questions, only 3 or 4 questions were asked. So it is very unpredictable again. But still, the U in UPSC is not for unpredictable, it is for union. Anything else? Shall we wrap it up then? Chalo, all the very best everyone, and I hope to see each of your name very soon in the list. So